A quiet evening drive turned into a $1 million mistake, the moment a prejudiced officer decided he was above the law. When a black woman sitting calmly behind the wheel of her brand-new luxury SUV was unlawfully slapped in irons, the arresting officer thought he was making a hero's bust. He smirked, confident he had caught a criminal. He did not know the woman he had just humiliated was one of the most powerful legal figures in the district. He did not see the federal credentials resting securely in her center console. He did not know about her flawless conviction rate or her reputation in the federal courts. And he certainly did not foresee the absolute legal hellfire she was about to unleash on his entire career. This is exactly what happens when unchecked prejudice pulls over the United States Department of Justice. The rain had just begun to slick the asphalt of the suburban road, casting long, wavering reflections of the streetlights across the upscale neighborhood. Serena Vale let out a long, slow breath, leaning back into the heated leather seat of her new Range Rover. She had just walked out of the federal courthouse after a grueling day. As a senior assistant United States attorney, Serena handled some of the most complex, high-stakes, white-collar crime cases in the district. For an extended period, she had been buried under mountains of financial subpoenas, wiretap transcripts, and witness depositions, dismantling a multi-million-dollar embezzlement ring. She had just secured a guilty verdict on all counts. The SUV she was driving was her reward to herself, a well-earned luxury purchase she had made recently. It still carried the temporary dealer tag securely fastened to the tinted rear window, and the cabin still smelled richly of fresh leather and mahogany. She was exhausted, yet it was the deep, satisfying exhaustion of a hard-won victory. She was looking forward to a hot shower, a glass of expensive Pinot Noir, and sleeping in for once. Then the interior of her car was flooded with flashing red and blue lights. Serena glanced in her rearview mirror. A local police cruiser was riding her bumper, its sirens letting out a short, aggressive whoop to signal her to pull over. Her brow furrowed in confusion. She glanced down at her digital speedometer. She was doing the speed limit. She had not swerved. She had not run a light. And her taillights were perfectly functional. Her legal mind immediately began cataloging the situation. No probable cause for a traffic violation. Temporary tags were visible and valid. Despite the lack of justification, Serena's training kicked in. She signaled calmly, pulled her heavy vehicle smoothly onto the well-lit shoulder of the road, and placed the car in park. She rolled down all 4 windows, a standard safety procedure she had learned years ago, turned on the interior dome light, and placed both of her hands flat on the top of the steering wheel, where they were clearly visible. In the side mirror, she watched the driver's side door of the cruiser swing open. A tall, heavily built officer stepped out. Even in the rain, his posture was rigid, his shoulders squared in a way that telegraphed an aggressive, combative energy. He did not walk up to her car. He stalked toward it, his hand resting casually but purposefully on the butt of his holstered service weapon. This was Officer Harlan Gage. He had a reputation in the department, one that had resulted in several internal affairs complaints that miraculously disappeared before formal reprimands were issued. He considered himself a wolf in a sheep-filled suburb, determined to keep the wrong elements out of the affluent neighborhoods he patrolled. Gage reached the driver's side window and immediately shone a high-lumen tactical flashlight directly into Serena's eyes, blinding her temporarily. "License, registration, and proof of insurance," Gage demanded, his voice a low, gravelly bark, devoid of any standard professional greeting. Serena squinted against the blinding beam, keeping her hands perfectly still on the wheel. "Good evening, officer. Could you please lower the flashlight a bit so I can see you?" "I said license and registration," Gage snapped, the light not moving an inch. "Don't give me instructions. Just hand over the paperwork." Serena maintained her composure. As a federal prosecutor, She routinely stared down cartel bosses and arrogant billionaires. A local beat cop with an attitude problem was not going to rattle her. My license is in my purse on the passenger seat, and the registration is in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for them now. Make it slow, Gage warned, his tone dripping with an unwarranted suspicion that made the hairs on the back of Serena's neck stand up. She retrieved her driver's license and the crisp, newly printed registration paperwork from the dealership, handing them out the window. Gage snatched them from her fingers. He flicked his flashlight onto the documents, then back to Serena's face, his eyes narrowing. "Where are you heading tonight?" Gage asked, his tone shifting from aggressive to interrogative. "Home," Serena answered simply, offering no extraneous information. She knew her rights. She did not have to provide an itinerary. "And where is home?" "In the city," she replied. Gage let out a dry, humorless scoff. He leaned closer to the window, his breath smelling faintly of stale coffee and tobacco. "You're a long way from the city, so let's cut the act. Whose car is this? A boyfriend? A boss? Did you take it without asking?" Serena felt a cold, sharp anger bloom in her chest, but she locked it down instantly. Emotion was the enemy of reason, and right now she needed to be sharp. She recognized exactly what this was. It was not a traffic stop. It was a fishing expedition fueled by blatant, unapologetic profiling. He saw a young black woman in a highly expensive car in a wealthy, predominantly white neighborhood, and his mind immediately jumped to theft. "Officer," Serena said, her voice dropping an octave, settling into the precise, measured tone she used in the courtroom during cross-examinations. "I purchased this vehicle recently from the Land Rover dealership. The temporary tags are valid. The registration is valid, and my license is perfectly clear. Now, could you please tell me why I was pulled over?" Gage did not like her tone. He did not like the big words, and he especially did not like the utter lack of fear in her eyes. People were supposed to be nervous when he pulled them over. They were supposed to stutter and apologize. "I asked the questions here," Gage growled. "Step out of the vehicle." The rain was falling harder now, drumming a steady, chaotic rhythm against the roof of the SUV. Serena did not move. Her hands remained on the steering wheel. "Officer," Serena said calmly, ensuring her voice would be picked up by the dash cam she knew was rolling in his cruiser. "I am not stepping out of the vehicle in the pouring rain. I've committed no traffic violation, and you have not articulated a reasonable, articulable suspicion that I have committed a crime. If you are going to write me a citation, please do so. Otherwise, am I free to go?" Gage's face flushed a deep, mottled red. The audacity of this woman quoting law to him was a direct strike to his ego. He stepped back and placed his hand firmly on the handle of his weapon. "This is a lawful order," Gage barked, his voice rising over the sound of the rain. "I'm investigating a potentially stolen vehicle with forged registration documents. Step out of the car right now, or I will remove you from it." Serena stared at him for seconds. She knew she was right, but she also knew the statistics. She knew the reality of a dark road, an angry officer, and a badge that provided him with a dangerous shield of qualified immunity. Fighting him on the side of the road would only escalate his aggression. The courtroom was her arena, not the wet asphalt. "I am complying," Serena said clearly. "I am unbuckling my seatbelt. I am opening the door." She pushed the heavy door open and stepped out into the chill of the night rain. She was wearing a tailored charcoal gray designer suit, which immediately began to soak through. Before she could even close the door, Gage grabbed her roughly by the left shoulder, spinning her around and shoving her chest against the wet side of her new car. The force of the impact knocked the breath out of her. "What are you doing?" Serena gasped, genuine shock piercing through her calm facade. "Detaining a suspect," Gage sneered. He yanked her arms behind her back with excessive force. Serena felt the cold, unforgiving bite of metal handcuffs clamping tightly around her wrists. The teeth of the cuffs ratcheted down, pinching her skin. "You are making a monumental mistake," Serena said, her voice trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from an overwhelming surge of adrenaline and fury. "I strongly advise you to call your patrol supervisor to this scene immediately." "Shut your mouth," Gage snapped, patting down her pockets with a rough disregard for professional boundaries. "I don't need a supervisor to bust a car thief." Just then, a second cruiser pulled up, its tires hissing against the wet pavement. Officer Tanner Reed stepped out, jogging over. Reed was younger, only a couple of years out of the academy, and he looked immediately uneasy at the scene before him. "Everything good here, Gage?" Reed asked, shining his own light on Serena, who was standing handcuffed in the rain. Her expensive suit ruined, she glared daggers at the senior officer. "Got a stolen vehicle in progress," Gage said smugly. "Suspect is uncooperative. Fake registration. Probably took it from one of the houses up on the ridge." "I am an attorney," Serena stated loudly, directing her words to Reed, hoping to find a shred of reason in the younger man. "This vehicle is registered to me. There is no probable cause for this stop, and there is certainly no probable cause for an arrest. If you search my vehicle without a warrant, everything you find will be fruit of the poisonous tree." Reed hesitated, glancing at the polished, highly articulate woman, then down at the registration Gage was holding. Harlan, did you run the plates through dispatch yet?" "I don't need to run the tags," Gage scoffed. "Look at it. Paper tags, fake registration. She's driving a car worth more than she'll make in her lifetime. I'm going to search the cabin for weapons or drugs." "You do not have my consent to search my vehicle," Serena said firmly, her voice echoing in the wet night air. Gage ignored her completely. He left Serena standing in the rain with Reed and leaned into the driver's side of the Range Rover. He began tearing through her immaculate car, pulling papers out of the glove box, yanking open the center console, and tossing items onto the passenger seat. Inside the center console, buried beneath some receipts, was Serena's leather credential case. Gage grabbed it. He flipped it open. Inside was a heavy gold badge and a federal ID card that clearly read, "Serena Vale, Department of Justice, United States Attorney's Office." Gage barely glanced at it in the dim interior light. He saw the badge, assumed she had bought a fake novelty item to try and talk her way out of tickets, and tossed it carelessly onto the passenger floorboard. "Nothing in here but a bunch of legal garbage and a fake badge," Gage yelled out to Reed. "Put her in the back of my cruiser. We're taking her in for grand theft auto, forgery, and resisting arrest." Reed looked at Serena, his face pale. "Ma'am, please come with me." "Hey, Officer Reed, is it?" Serena asked, reading his nameplate as he escorted her to the squad car. "I want you to remember this exact moment. I want you to remember that I warned both of you. You are aiding in an unlawful arrest and a civil rights violation." Reed swallowed hard, gently pushing her head down to clear the doorframe as she slid into the hard plastic back seat of the cruiser. "I'm just following orders, ma'am." "Ignorance of the law is not a defense, Officer Reed," Serena replied coldly, "and neither is following unlawful orders." The door slammed shut, locking her in the claustrophobic, cage-like back of the police car. She was soaked. Her wrists were throbbing from the tight metal, and her beautiful new car was sitting on the side of the highway being violated by a corrupt cop. Serena closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let the shock fade away. In its place, a cold, calculating legal strategy began to form. Officer Harlan Gage wanted to play a game of power and intimidation, but he did not realize he had just dragged the United States government into his petty, biased power trip. The ride to the precinct took minutes. For the entire duration, Gage sat in the driver's seat, cheerfully whistling along to the classic rock station playing on his radio, completely unbothered by the fact that he had just committed multiple constitutional violations. Serena sat in the back, silent as a tomb. She did not cry. She did not beg. And she did not argue. Every word she spoke now would be recorded, and she was saving her ammunition for the people who actually mattered. She was meticulously building her case in her head. Violation of the Fourth Amendment, unreasonable search and seizure, false imprisonment, assault under color of law, racial profiling, and malicious prosecution. Gage was practically handing her his badge on a silver platter. The cruiser pulled into the sally port of the precinct. The heavy concrete walls and fluorescent lights cast a harsh, unforgiving glare. Gage got out, opened the back door, and roughly pulled Serena out by her arm. "All right, sweetheart," Gage sneered. "Welcome to reality. We're going to get you booked, fingerprinted, and put in a nice holding cell until the detectives figure out exactly who you stole this car from." Serena did not respond. She simply stared right through him, an expression of utter disdain on her face. He marched her through the heavy metal doors and into the chaotic bullpen of the precinct. Telephones were ringing. Officers were typing at their desks, and the smell of stale coffee, body odor, and industrial floor wax hung heavy in the air. Gage led her to the booking desk, where Sergeant Desmond Hale, a tired-looking veteran with a graying mustache, was staring at a computer screen. "What do we have, Gage?" Hale asked without looking up, his fingers clacking lazily on the keyboard. "Grand theft auto, forgery, and resisting," Gage announced loudly, clearly wanting the rest of the room to hear his triumph. Caught her driving a stolen Range Rover out by the Westbury Estates. Had fake registration printed off the internet. Hale finally looked up. His eyes traveled from Gage's smug face to the soaking wet, handcuffed black woman standing beside him. Hale's brow furrowed. He took in her ruined designer suit, her immaculate albeit wet hair, and the piercing, deeply intelligent glare she was giving him. She did not look like a car thief. She looked like somebody who could buy and sell the entire precinct. "Name?" Hale asked, looking at Serena. "My name is Serena Vale," she said, her voice clear and carrying across the room, ensuring everyone heard her. "And I would like to inform you, Sergeant, that I am being held unlawfully. My vehicle was illegally searched. I was assaulted, and I demand my right to a telephone call immediately." Gage scoffed. "She's got a mouth on her, too. Wants to quote the law like she's some kind of lawyer." "I am a lawyer," Serena stated, locking eyes with the sergeant. "I am a senior assistant United States attorney for this district, and unless you want the Department of Justice raining hell down on this precinct by sunrise, you will remove these handcuffs right now." A sudden, chilling silence fell over the immediate area around the booking desk. The typing from a nearby desk stopped. Officer Tanner Reed, who had followed them inside, suddenly looked like he was going to be sick. Gage, however, threw his head back and laughed. "A federal prosecutor, right? And I'm the director of the FBI, Sarge. She had a fake tin badge in her car, too. Complete psycho. Just book her." Sergeant Hale did not laugh. He had been on the force for decades. He had an instinct for when things were going wrong. And right now, his instincts were screaming like a fire alarm. The woman's demeanor, her vocabulary, her absolute lack of panic, it did not fit. "Hold on," Hale said slowly, raising a hand. "You said your name is Serena Vale?" "That is correct," Serena said. Hale turned to his computer and opened the state and federal database. He typed in her name. A few seconds later, a profile loaded on his screen. The color rapidly drained from Sergeant Hale's face. The photograph on the screen, a professional, stern headshot, matched the soaking wet woman in handcuffs perfectly. The title beneath the photo read, "Serena Vale, Senior Assistant United States Attorney, Criminal Division." Hale slowly stood up from his chair. He looked at Gage, and the expression on his face was a mixture of horror and absolute fury. "Gage," Hale whispered, his voice shaking. "What did you do?" "What?" Gage asked, oblivious to the impending doom. "I brought in a car thief." Before Hale could respond, The heavy wooden door to the watch commander's office swung open. Captain Victor Lang stepped out. He held a ceramic coffee mug in one hand and a stack of case files in the other. He had a stern, no-nonsense face and commanded absolute respect in his precinct. He took steps out of his office, his eyes sweeping the room before they landed on the booking desk. He froze. The coffee mug in his hand tilted dangerously, spilling a few drops of hot brown liquid onto the linoleum floor. Captain Lang knew Serena Vale. He knew her very well. Weeks earlier, he had sat in a conference room with her for hours, coordinating a joint local federal task force to take down a regional drug trafficking syndicate. He knew how relentless she was, how brilliant she was, and how much power she wielded in the courtroom. And right now, she was standing in his precinct, soaking wet, shivering, and wearing his department's steel handcuffs. "What in the absolute hell is going on here?" Captain Lang's voice boomed across the silent room, vibrating with a rage that made every officer in the vicinity flinch. Gage puffed out his chest, stepping forward. "Captain, I just pulled this suspect over driving a stolen." "Shut your mouth, Gage!" Lang roared, dropping the files onto a nearby desk and sprinting toward the booking counter. He practically shoved Gage out of the way. Lang stepped directly in front of Serena. He looked at her wrists bound tightly in metal, and then looked her in the eyes. Serena held his gaze, her expression a mask of cold fury. "Vale," Captain Lang said, his voice dropping to a horrified whisper. "My God, are you all right?" Gage's arrogant smile instantly vanished. He looked at the captain, then at Serena. His brain desperately tried to process the interaction. Serena did not look at Gage. She kept her eyes locked dead on the captain. "No, Captain Lang, I am not all right," Serena said, her voice dripping with ice. "I have just been unlawfully detained, assaulted, and kidnapped by your officer under the guise of racial profiling. Now, take these cuffs off me, because the next person I'm speaking to is the Attorney General." The heavy silence in the precinct was deafening, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent overhead lights and the relentless drumming of rain against the small barred windows. Captain Lang's face turned an ashen gray as the gravity of Serena's words struck him like a physical blow. He did not just know Serena Vale. He knew her boss, the formidable United States Attorney Harrison Vale, a man notorious for burying corrupt public officials under mountains of federal indictments. "Sergeant Hale," Captain Lang barked, his voice trembling with a potent mix of panic and rage. "Get the keys. Take those cuffs off Ms. Vale this instant." Sergeant Hale scrambled over the counter, his hands shaking so badly he dropped the small silver handcuff key twice before finally slotting it into the lock. With a sharp click, the heavy steel bracelet sprang open. Serena rubbed her raw red wrists, her eyes never leaving the captain's face. She did not rub them with weakness or relief. She rubbed them with the slow, methodical calculation of a predator assessing its prey. Officer Harlan Gage stood frozen, his brain misfiring as he tried to bridge the gap between his reality, where he was a tough, street-smart cop catching a high-end car thief, and the actual reality where he had just assaulted and kidnapped a high-ranking federal prosecutor. "Captain," Gage stammered, his usual swagger entirely evaporated, replaced by the pathetic whine of a bully cornered. "Listen to me. I made a mistake. I admit it. It was a bad call. It was dark. It was raining. The tags looked suspicious. I'm sorry, Ms. Vale. I am deeply sorry." Serena stepped closer to the captain, her ruined wetsuit doing nothing to diminish her commanding presence. "Officer Gage," she said, her tone suddenly shifting to crisp professional authority. "I want the dashcam footage from your cruiser, as well as the body cam footage from both you and Officer Reed, downloaded and secured directly onto a hard drive within minutes. I want a documented chain of custody. If a single second of that footage goes missing or experiences a technical glitch, I will hold this entire department in contempt of a federal investigation." "Federal investigation?" Lang asked, dread pooling in his stomach. "Captain, the moment your officer laid his hands on me, assaulted me under color of law, and unlawfully detained a federal official, he escalated it to the DOJ. This is no longer a local administrative issue. This is a violation of federal law. It is a federal felony." She turned slightly to look at Gage, who was now standing disarmed and defenseless, the reality of his impending doom finally crashing down upon him. "I'm going to use your desk, Captain," Serena stated, not asking for permission. "I need to make a phone call." Special Agent Quentin Hale of the FBI's Public Corruption and Civil Rights Unit did not like being woken up at night. He especially did not like being woken up by a direct phone call from United States Attorney Harrison Vale. But when Vale told him that his top prosecutor had been assaulted and unlawfully arrested by a local patrolman, Hale was out of bed, dressed, and driving his unmarked dark SUV toward the precinct in minutes. By the time Hale arrived, accompanied by 2 other stern-faced FBI agents in dark windbreakers, the atmosphere inside the precinct had shifted from tense to a state of absolute localized panic. Serena was sitting behind Captain Lang's desk, sipping a cup of hot tea someone had nervously provided her, reviewing a printed copy of the precinct's arrest log. Captain Lang was standing near the door, looking completely out of his depth. "Serena," Hale said as he strode into the office, his sharp eyes taking in her disheveled appearance and the angry red marks still visible on her wrists. "Are you injured? Do you need paramedics?" "I'm fine, Quentin," Serena replied calmly, setting the log down. "Just thoroughly unimpressed with the local talent." Hale turned his attention to Captain Lang. The FBI agent was a towering man with a severe buzz cut and a gaze that felt like a physical interrogation. "Captain Lang, I am Special Agent Hale, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Effective immediately, my unit is taking jurisdiction over this incident." "Agent Hale, I assure you we are handling this," Lang attempted to say, though his voice lacked conviction. "We've already stripped Officer Gage of his—" "You aren't handling anything, Captain," Hale interrupted seamlessly. "Your officer assaulted a federal prosecutor. That makes this a federal crime scene. My agents are currently outside seizing Officer Gage's patrol vehicle for evidence processing. We will be taking the dash cam footage, the body cam footage, the dispatch logs, and every personnel file you have on Harlan Gage going back to the day he graduated the academy." Lang swallowed hard, nodding slowly. He knew better than to argue with the Bureau when they had a legitimate statutory hook, and assaulting an AUSA was about as legitimate as it got. Hale pulled up a chair across from Serena. "Walk me through it from the beginning." For the next stretch of time, Serena meticulously recounted the event. She did not exaggerate. She did not add emotional flair. She presented the facts with the clinical precision of a seasoned litigator. She detailed the lack of probable cause, the immediate escalation, the refusal to examine her valid registration, the physical assault, the illegal search of her vehicle, and the blatant disregard for her federal credentials. As she spoke, Officer Tanner Reed was brought into the room by one of the other FBI agents. Reed looked terrified, his eyes darting between Hale and Serena. "Officer Reed," Hale said, not looking up from the notepad he was writing on. "Reed states that you witnessed the assault and illegal search, and that you failed to intervene, though you did attempt to verify the vehicle's tags with dispatch, which Officer Gage verbally overrode. Is this accurate?" "Yes, sir," Reed said quickly, eager to cooperate. "I swear I didn't want any part of it. I told him we should run the tags. He had his mind made up. He said she didn't look like she belonged in that car." Hale stopped writing. He slowly looked up, his pen hovering over the paper. "He said what?" Reed gulped. "He said she didn't look like the type of person who belonged in a luxury car. He assumed she stole it from one of the houses on the ridge." Serena offered a small, grim smile. "There it is. The mens rea, the discriminatory intent required for a civil rights violation." Hale closed his notepad with a definitive snap. "Thank you, Officer Reed. Your cooperation has likely saved your career tonight. However, you will still be facing a thorough interview tomorrow morning at the field office regarding your failure to intervene." Reed nodded vigorously, looking relieved he was not leaving the precinct in handcuffs himself. "Bring Gage in," Hale ordered his agents. A moment later, Harlan Gage was escorted into the captain's office. The swaggering, arrogant cop, who had terrorized Serena on the side of the highway, was gone. In his place was a defeated, pale man who looked like he had suddenly aged years. He saw the FBI windbreakers. He saw Serena sitting comfortably at the captain's desk, and he saw his entire life unraveling before his eyes. "Harlan Gage," Hale said, standing up to his full height. "I am Special Agent Hale with the FBI. You are currently the subject of a federal criminal investigation regarding violations of federal law. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a federal court of law." Gage's knees buckled slightly. He reached out to grab the back of a chair to steady himself. "Federal court? Wait. Look, I made a mistake. I admit it. It was a bad call. It was dark. It was raining. The tags looked suspicious. I'm sorry, Ms. Vale. I am deeply sorry." Serena stood up. She walked around the desk until she was standing just a few feet away from the man who had shoved her against her own car. "You aren't sorry that you profiled me, Gage," Serena said, her voice quiet but carrying an immense weight. "You aren't sorry that you violated your oath or that you assaulted a citizen. You're only sorry because you pulled over someone who has the power to destroy you. You thought I was just another person you could bully into submission. You thought you were the apex predator on that dark road." Gage could not look her in the eye. He stared at the floor, a single bead of sweat rolling down the side of his face. "Karma," Serena continued, stepping even closer, "is a remarkably efficient concept, officer. You built your career on intimidating the vulnerable, and now you're going to spend the rest of your life answering to the very justice system you mocked." "Agent Hale," Serena said, turning slightly, "please remove this man from my sight." Hale nodded to his agents. "Cuff him. Standard procedure." The click of the federal handcuffs closing around Gage's wrists sounded identical to the ones he had used on Serena hours earlier, but the context was vastly, fundamentally different. As the FBI agents marched the disgraced, terrified former cop out of the office and through the bullpen in full view of every officer he had once commanded and bullied, Serena felt a profound, cold sense of satisfaction. The hard karma had not just hit back, it had decimated him entirely. But Serena was not done yet. Gage was just a symptom of the disease. She fully intended to cure the whole damn precinct. In the aftermath of the arrest, the city woke up to a localized earthquake. The news had not just leaked, it had exploded across every major broadcast network and digital publication in the state. Federal prosecutor detained in racially motivated traffic stop. The headline dominated the morning cycle, accompanied by the heavily blurred yet unmistakable dashcam footage that Agent Hale's team had promptly leaked to ensure the local precinct could not sweep it under the rug. For the precinct, it was a nightmare. The telephones rang incessantly. The mayor's office demanded immediate answers, and a crowd of protesters had already begun forming near the Sally Port. But for Serena Vale, it was just another day at the office. She walked into the United States Attorney's office wearing a sharp, flawless navy blue suit, her expression betraying none of the physical or emotional toll of the previous night. Her wrists were bruised, safely hidden beneath the crisp cuffs of her silk blouse, but her mind was sharper than ever. She marched directly into the expansive corner office of United States Attorney Harrison Vale, the silver-haired legal titan who had built his career taking down organized crime. "Serena," Harrison Vale said, standing up and motioning to the leather chair across from his desk. "I saw the initial FBI report Hale filed this morning. I want to know exactly how far you want to take this. All the way to the bedrock, Harrison, Serena replied, taking a seat and crossing her legs. Harlan Gage is a symptom. The fact that he felt comfortable assaulting a citizen, ignoring valid registration, and conducting an illegal search while his junior partner stood by means this is systemic. I don't just want Gage's badge. I want his freedom. And I want a Department of Justice consent decree slapped on that entire precinct. Harrison Vale smiled, a thin, dangerous smile. He lived for this kind of structural takedown. Hale is already processing the cruiser's data, but Gage's union lawyer has been calling my office since dawn. He wants a plea deal, misdemeanor assault, forced resignation, and a public apology. He's trying to keep his client's pension intact. Serena let out a cold, sharp laugh. A misdemeanor? He violated federal law. He kidnapped me on the side of a highway. Tell his lawyer that if he even utters the word misdemeanor again, we will hit his client with a superseding indictment that includes falsifying official records, because I guarantee you his incident reports do not match his body cam footage. The legal hellfire had officially been ignited. In the weeks that followed, the discovery process became an absolute bloodbath for Harlan Gage. Once the FBI seized the precinct servers, they did not just look at the night of Serena's arrest. They pulled the thread on Gage's entire career. The twists came fast and devastating. Agent Hale's team uncovered a shocking pattern of behavior. Gage had a habit of specifically targeting minorities driving high-value vehicles in affluent neighborhoods. But the real nail in the coffin came from a hidden folder on Gage's personal precinct computer. He had been actively turning off his body cam during crucial moments of traffic stops to manufacture probable cause narratives. The karma hit back hardest when the publicity of Serena's case empowered his past victims to step out of the shadows. A young software engineer came forward, providing time-stamped video evidence of Gage destroying his property during a baseless search years earlier. A local business owner testified that Gage had extorted him to avoid nuisance citations. Because Serena had stood her ground, the dam had burst. Officer Tanner Reed, terrified of facing federal prison time for conspiracy and failure to intervene, formally turned state's evidence. In a closed-door deposition, Reed laid out the toxic culture Gage had cultivated, admitting that Gage actively trained younger officers to bypass Fourth Amendment rights if they knew someone was guilty based on their appearance. Gage, who had been out on a heavily restricted bail, was forced to watch his life disintegrate. His wife filed for divorce, citing the overwhelming public disgrace. The police union, realizing the sheer toxicity of the evidence the federal government possessed, quietly withdrew their funding for his legal defense, leaving him to rely on an overworked public defender. He had gone from an apex predator holding a badge to a universally despised criminal defendant stripped of his power, his community, and his dignity. And the trial had not even started yet. Inside the mahogany-paneled walls of the United States District Court, the air was so thick with anticipation, it felt difficult to breathe. The gallery was packed shoulder to shoulder, a sea of reporters, legal analysts, and, most importantly, the citizens of the community who had spent years suffering in silence under Officer Harlan Gage's badge. Flashbulbs had blinded them on the courthouse steps, but inside this cavernous room, the only illumination that mattered was the glaring light of federal justice. Sitting in the front row, just behind the wooden partition that separated the gallery from the well of the court, was Adrian Vale, Serena's fiancé, a partner at a prestigious downtown corporate law firm. He caught her eye as she organized her legal pads at the prosecution table, offering a small, incredibly proud smile. The night of her arrest, Adrian had nearly torn the precinct doors off their hinges trying to get to her. Now, he was here to watch her finish the job. His unwavering presence grounded her, a quiet anchor of romance and solidarity amidst the swirling storm of the trial. Serena broke her gaze with Adrian and turned her attention to the defense table. Harlan Gage was a ghost of the hulking, arrogant predator who had stalked up to her driver's side window weeks earlier. His ill-fitting coupouste hung off his shrinking frame. His complexion was a sickly gray, and his hands trembled slightly as he clutched a ballpoint pen. He was completely bankrupt, both morally and financially. His police union had abandoned him. His pension was frozen pending the trial's outcome, and his wife had filed for divorce the moment the FBI raided their home. Karma had not just knocked on his door, it had kicked it down. Special Prosecutor Preston Hale, a silver-haired titan of the Department of Justice, stood to call his final witness. The United States calls Senior Assistant United States Attorney Serena Vale to the stand. A hushed murmur rippled through the gallery as Serena stood, smoothing the skirt of her impeccable charcoal gray designer suit, a deliberate echo of the ruined outfit she had worn on that rainy highway. She walked to the witness box with the poised, lethal air of a woman who owned the room. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore the oath, and took her seat. For the next stretch of time, Serena delivered an absolute masterclass in legal dismantling. Under Hale's questioning, she painted a vivid, horrifying picture of a man who used his uniform as a shield for unchecked bigotry. But the true bloodbath began when Gage's overworked defense attorney stood for cross-examination. The attorney was sweating profusely, knowing he was stepping into a ring with an apex legal predator. "Ms. Vale," the attorney began, his voice lacking conviction, "is it not possible that in the dark, with the heavy rain, Officer Gage simply made a good-faith mistake regarding your temporary tags? You must admit, paper tags are frequently forged in that specific area." Serena leaned forward, her eyes locking onto the attorney with chilling intensity. "Mr. Barnes, a good-faith mistake involves running the vehicle's tags through dispatch, which your client expressly forbade his partner from doing. A good-faith mistake involves inspecting the valid watermarked dealership registration I handed him, which your client ignored. What your client did was observe a young black woman operating a luxury Range Rover and allow his deep-seated racial prejudice to manufacture a phantom crime. He did not see a driver, Mr. Barnes. He saw a target." The attorney swallowed hard, shuffling his notes. "But you refused to step out of the vehicle initially. Surely you understand how that heightened his suspicion." "I am a federal prosecutor," Serena countered, her voice ringing off the high ceilings, echoing with undeniable authority. "I am intimately aware of Fourth Amendment jurisprudence. I calmly informed your client that he lacked reasonable articulable suspicion to detain me. In response to my assertion of my constitutional rights, he physically assaulted me, shoved me against the wet steel of my vehicle, clamped metal handcuffs tight enough to bruise my wrists, and illegally searched my property. If this is how he treats an officer of the federal court, I shudder to think what he has done to the vulnerable citizens sitting behind you in this gallery." The attorney had no further questions. He sat down, utterly defeated. Gage buried his face in his hands, realizing the insurmountable mountain of his own arrogance had finally collapsed on top of him. The jury deliberation was agonizingly swift. They reached a verdict before long, and the buzzer sounded, signaling they had reached a decision. The courtroom scrambled to order. As the jury foreperson, a stern-faced schoolteacher, stood to read the decision, the silence in the room was deafening. On the first count of the indictment, deprivation of rights under color of law, a violation of federal statute, we find the defendant, Harlan Gage, guilty. A collective shuddering gasp swept through the room. Several of Gage's past victims in the gallery began to openly weep, clutching each other's hands. Adrian closed his eyes and let out a long breath of relief. On the second count, false imprisonment, guilty. On the third count, official misconduct, Guilty. On the fourth count, falsifying official records, guilty. The Honorable Judge Vivian Ross, a woman renowned for her absolute zero-tolerance policy on systemic corruption, did not wait for a separate sentencing hearing. She looked down at Gage from her elevated bench, her expression one of utter disdain. "Mr. Gage," Judge Ross said, her voice striking like a gavel, "you were entrusted with a sacred authority to protect and serve the public. Instead, you weaponized that authority. You operated under the delusion that your badge made you untouchable, that you could terrorize those you deemed beneath you with total impunity. You made a fatal miscalculation when you targeted someone who possessed the strength, the intellect, and the courage to hold a mirror up to your corruption. It is the paramount duty of this court to ensure that the public trusts the institutions designed to protect them. Your actions have deeply fractured that trust. Therefore, I am sentencing you to years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. Furthermore, upon your felony conviction, your law enforcement pension is hereby permanently revoked. You will not see a single dime of taxpayer money for the rest of your natural life. You are remanded into the custody of the United States Marshals immediately." The heavy metallic rattle of the marshal's chains approaching Gage was the sweetest symphony Serena had ever heard. It was not just vengeance, it was the purest distillation of justice, as the disgraced, broken man was hauled to his feet and led away, stripped of his power, his community, and his freedom. He cast one final terrified look back at Serena. She did not gloat. She simply offered him a cold, definitive nod, a silent promise kept. Later, Serena walked out of the federal courthouse, her arm linked securely through Adrian's. The heavy rain of that horrible night felt like a distant memory, replaced by the brilliant golden warmth of the afternoon sun. The paparazzi shouted her name, but she ignored them. Walking purposefully toward the parking garage, she approached her sleek matte black Range Rover. She unlocked the doors, the interior lights glowing softly, welcoming her into the rich scent of leather. As she slid into the driver's seat and the powerful motor roared to life with a confident purr, she smiled. She had taken the very system designed to break her and used it to break the corrupt men hiding within it. Power was not always loud. Sometimes it was just the quiet, unstoppable force of the truth driving forward and leaving the wreckage of ignorance entirely in the dust. What an absolute powerhouse of a story. From the tense, infuriating moments on the side of that dark highway, to the satisfying, undeniable crush of the federal legal hammer. Serena's journey proves that true power lies in maintaining composure and knowing your rights. Harlan Gage thought he was targeting an easy mark, but he ended up pulling over his own worst nightmare. Watching that karma hit back in the courtroom was incredibly satisfying. If you love this dramatic tale of justice, retribution, and taking down a corrupt bully, please smash that like button. It helps push these stories out to more people. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who loves a brilliant underdog story where the villain gets exactly what they deserve. And hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss another dramatic storytelling session. See you in the next one.